Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Danielle, here with Shano, sitting in for Tom today, and we are joined by one of my favorite people on the entire planet, Brad Friedman, founder and publisher of the Brad blog, host of the Bradcast on KPFK, all of which you can check all of which you can check out at bradblog.com and on Twitter at the Bradblog. Hi, Brad.
Hi, Danielle. How are you?
I am doing very well. Although,
if it makes you feel any better, Tom, whenever I'm on with Tom, he can't say Brad blog either for some reason.
Too much alliteration.
Yeah, maybe so.
But I'm just going to blame that I was just that excited to talk to you, and I just overwhelmed by fangirling out to talk to Brad Friedman.
I'll take it.
All right. So, as many people who are familiar with your brilliant work know, you are the one and only when it comes to election integrity. That there is nobody quite like you in the dedication and detailed reporting. And without that, however would we know that Jim Gilmore won an entire town in Massachusetts on Super Tuesday? What? Please explain,
exactly.
Brad.
Yeah, he did. According to the results reported by the election machine, the computers in Chelsea, Massachusetts, yes, on election night on Super Tuesday, Jim Gilmore wiped out everybody. Wiped out Donald Trump, wiped out Ted Cruz, wiped out everybody until, thankfully, people noticed that, and they were able to go back and check and find out that, no, Jim Gilmore didn't win, but and that the computers, all we're told from Chelsea, Massachusetts, is that the computers had it wrong. It was a computer error. So they corrected it, and what do you know?
Yeah.
Donald Trump actually won. But how many times does that happen? And people don't notice because it's not something quite as insane as Jim Gilmore wins GOP the presidential primary.
Speaking of computer glitches, I think we might have one at the moment. We seem to have a bad connection, Brad. I'm going to hang up really quickly, and Troy is going to call you right back to get a better connection. Is that okay?
Sure, fair enough, absolutely.
Okay, we were going to be right back in like seconds with Brad Friedman.
That is an amazing thing. That how many times has one of these machines flipped? And we just don't know about it because
nobody talks about it.
Well, it's not even that no one talks about it. When you get an obviously insane outside of the statistics, the norms of what
when you get more than one standard deviation away from the mean, just for the really statistical geeks out there who like wonk as much as I do.
And then you can clearly say, well, it happened in this situation. What about the ones that aren't as blatant?
Yes.
It happen probably all the time.
That's why we need fine folks like Brad Friedman to tell us about it. Brad, are you back with us?
I am. I hope this sounds better.
It sounds much better. Thank you. Much, much better. Okay. So in addition to, as Shane and I were just saying, the really noticeable errors, the noticeable, hey, WTF is going on there, like Jim Gilmore, who is no longer winning a town. What else happened on Super Tuesday that so many people don't know about?
Of course, we don't know what we don't know about.
True. Excellent point.
That's the problem, and you're absolutely right. And how often does that sort of thing happen? And we don't notice it because it's not Jim Gilmore who won, but it's Donald Trump who got an extra 1,000 votes, or Hillary Clinton who got an extra 1,000 votes, because we don't count. And that was a place, Chelsea, Massachusetts, has paper ballots. But people think when they have paper ballots, they're fine. They don't realize that those paper ballots are generally run through computer op scan systems and never checked by any human beings. So you had problems on Super Tuesday, obviously, with something like Jim Gilmore winning a primary. That, thankfully, we found out about. And we could go back and check the ballots and find out, nope, the computer somehow made this error, and so we could correct it. But on touchscreen systems, which we have all over the country still, shamefully, you'll never know. You will never know how the voters actually voted. And so aside from that small problem, you also have the problem that when they go down on Election Day at the precinct, people can't vote. So that happened in places like Georgia and in Texas, where they still hate their voters so much they force them to vote on these machines. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, because the American experiment in computerized, unverifiable voting has been such a success, we're now doing something similar with registration systems, which is that on Election Day at the polls, a lot of places are now adding electronic poll books. And when those go down, people can't vote at all because the lines go out the door and people don't have paper backups to use, the old-fashioned register that you sign in. So when you have a big turnout election, even when you don't have a big turnout election, people end up spending hours in line simply because the stupid e-poll books don't work. So that was just amongst some of the problems that we've had over the past few election days that very few people bother to talk about.
Right. And as this is 2016 election is the first in 50 years without the full Voting Rights Act protection, I dare say that it's not a coincidence that we often see a lot of these glaring issues, like you mentioned in Texas and in Georgia, in states that were formerly covered by Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which said you couldn't institute these type of laws without Justice Department approval.
That's certainly true when it comes to voter registration stuff, like the new photo ID voting restriction down in Texas, which has been rejected by 3 different federal courts as illegal and unconstitutional, but is still in use in Texas anyway because the Republicans have slow-walked their appeal. And during the appeal, even though all of the courts who have looked at it have said that it's illegal and unconstitutional, the Supreme Court allowed it to stay in place during the appeal. So, so now you've got the voter registration, voter suppression to have to contend with as well, on top of, learning if the results being reported by the media are actually correct. I mean, it's... And those results from the media aren't even based on actual vote counts. They're based on things like exit polls and early voting. We saw an example of that in Louisiana over the weekend, actually.
Yes, there are so many issues here that I have heard, I'm not saying that I agree with, however, I have heard that, we shouldn't talk about these issues because they'll discourage people from voting. How is it that we change these, that we make sure we have integrity in our election process? And I don't mean that everybody has an ID, talking to you Republicans, without talking about these issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a dumb argument for a long time, mostly from Democrats, that, we don't want to do anything. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about the fact that our election results may not be correct, that our election results can't actually be overseen because it'll suppress the vote. I found that to be ridiculous over the years. Whenever I talk to people about this, they get furious. They want to take action. They want to, A, change the system locally, or B, do something to try and claw back some form of citizen oversight for their elections. And they say, well, what can I do? And I say, well, for one, you can't wait until after an election to complain about the electoral system. You can't even wait till days or weeks before an election to complain about the system, because these are big changes that need to be made. That's why I drive people crazy with this.
Oh, did we lose Brad?
I did not pull him out.
Drive people crazy. Well, hopefully we still have Brad. We're going to check. But Brad does not drive people crazy, at least not in a bad way, unless maybe you're tinkering with elections in a way that you shouldn't be. And then, by all means, Brad, drive them crazy. Anyhow, we're going to be back with more Brad Friedman, barring that we can get him back on the line, to talk about other issues that we need to discuss and consider as Democrats, as voters. Stick around. Brad, are you still with us?
I am still with you.
Okay. It's, I think, Donald Trump is trying to reach out his tiny hands to make sure that none of us can talk about the election.
I should have never purchased this Diebold phone system in the first place.
Darn it. You raised an issue that I think is very near and dear to the people who are watching right now, our Free Speech TV audience, and that is how media disenfranchises the vote. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, there's all sorts of things that the media do that ill-serve the voters. One of the things that I have been complaining about for weeks on end now is the way that they're reporting the delegate count, which is just completely inaccurate, by saying that Hillary Clinton has more than 1,000 delegates. Bernie Sanders isn't even close. He's got, barely 500 delegates. Well, the fact of the matter is, it's quite a close race, at least as of now. What they're doing is they're factoring in all of these unpledged delegates. And, these are people, party insiders, elected officials and so forth, who don't actually have to cast their vote until they get to the convention. And it seems unlikely that if, for example, Bernie Sanders has more delegates that he won by, voters actually voting, it seems unlikely that all of those super delegates would suddenly, give the nomination to Hillary or vice versa. So that's, take out the super delegates. It's a system that I'm sure the Republicans wish they have right now.
Isn't that the truth?
But it's incredibly undemocratic, and frankly, it's an insult to the voters. It's meaningless in that the delegates that are actually won so far are much closer than what the count would show, and all of the mainstream media is doing this. New York Times, AP, Washington Post, Google, they're all showing these super delegate counts in with the regular delegates. I mean, over the weekend, for example, Bernie won. Bernie Sanders
3 out of 4 races.
Delegates to Hillary's 64. Why isn't that the lead story that, Bernie Sanders won over the weekend? Well, it will be on on the broadcast today. But other than that, you wouldn't know it if all you did was watch the mainstream corporate media.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, they don't talk about the issues that actually get people out to vote. They never give them the opportunity to say, hey, I have a voice in this country and I have the chance to go and involve myself and change things when those issues aren't discussed, as they are on the broadcast. People don't feel involved enough to get out there and vote in the first place.
And they don't. That's right. And they don't give them substantive information to use.
Right.
The horse race coverage is absolutely mind blowing. How it's as if it is a sport event. There was a very serious debate last night in Flint, Michigan, between the two candidates, and is there any difference in their approach to, this toxic water crisis in Flint? Do Bernie Sanders' numbers really hold up when he talks about free college tuition and $1 trillion infrastructure plans and everything else? That ought to be what they're talking about, not who is going to win based on speculative polls. I mean, the media, our job is to serve the electorate.
Right.
And I would argue the corporate media is doing a terrible job of it.
Polls, I might add, that are often funded, sponsored, and ran by the same corporate media. We will be back with even more Brad Friedman in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Danielle, here with Shano, sitting in for Tom today, and still joined by the one and only Brad Friedman, founder and publisher of the Brad Blog, host of the Bradcast, which you can check out at bradblog.com, KPFK, and be sure to check out the Green News Report while you're there. Brad, I have one other issue that I really wanted to get your thoughts on, and I'm a little nervous even questioning, which is the caucus. A lot of Bernie's wins, I am openly a Bernie supporter, have been in caucus states, but my friends in those states say that they have been a total nightmare, that people have been shut out, blocked from being involved, that the results were not always clear. It seems like there's a lot of problems there, but they're helping the candidate I personally support. So what's the deal?
Well, here's the deal. That the caucuses were a mess in various places because you are able to oversee those caucuses. Voters are able to videotape what's going on. In most cases, you've got hand-counted paper ballots at the precinct. So even when there is a mess, we know there is a mess. We know, what we know. That's different than these primaries where the votes are all, completely concealed. You can't know if they are right or wrong. So while caucuses are, fundamentally anti-democratic, small d democratic, in that, you have to be available for the caucus, you have to, be able to be there to commit an hour or two on a very specific day at a very specific time, that's not good. But I am of two minds, perhaps like you, not because I'm rooting for any particular candidate, but because we have made our primary system and our general election system so untransparent and so unoverseeable that, frankly, I'm happy when we see the problems at the caucuses. That means we're actually seeing the problems, and we can do something about them. And, we saw in 2012, for example, the Iowa caucuses, the Republican Iowa caucuses. Well, because there were hand-counted paper ballots at the precinct, those caucuses were a mess, but because there were those ballots, people were able to say, no, wait a minute, I took photographs of the results at the caucus site on caucus night, and the numbers that are being reported centrally by the Republican Party are wrong. And they had the proof, and they were able to change the results so that the results eventually reflected the actual intent of the voters. So it's a mess, but it's a good thing that we can see that it's a mess, and we could try to fix that. That's just not the case with the
electronic
computerized voting system that we use now. Yeah.
Does
that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense. The mess that we could see is better than the mess we can't see, to paraphrase, if that's acceptable.
Yeah. That was much shorter. Good job.
Yes, but yours was much more brilliant. My concern, I think, in this election on both sides, we have a lot of new people who have never involved themselves in voting, in the electoral process, in the small d democracy. What do we say to those people when they get turned away or they watch their electronic ballot switch to a different candidate, or they feed a piece of paper into a machine never knowing that it will be counted? I mean, how do we make them stay involved?
It's really difficult. It's really difficult, and I understand those problems. I mean, and this is why I try to, correct the electoral system. What I try to tell people is take action to get your oversight back. For example, on election night, you can go to the polls when they close, and you can take photographs with your cell phone of the poll tapes as they're printed out from these electronic machines. Now, we don't know if those electronic machines counted it correctly, but we can, if we have photographs of what happened at the precinct on election night, we can compare those to the numbers that are eventually reported from the central headquarters, because a lot of times they change between what happened at the precinct and what gets reported on the website by the county or the state or the media, et cetera. So there are things that you can do to try to take action to change the system. And then above and beyond that, you have to let people know that voting is a right, and being not a privilege, but a right, and being able to oversee the results and the way the results are tallied is also a right. And we have to take that back from the counties, from the election officials who believe that this can be done out of sight in a secret, in this case, a secret black box. And that frankly comes back to, I believe, publicly hand-counting paper ballots at the precinct on election night before ballots are moved anywhere. And that's a fight that needs to go on all year round. You can't wait. I'm sorry, Bernie Sanders supporters, you can't wait until after your candidate has lost in a race that you have questions about. We need to do this in advance. And a lot more people are doing it, so I don't mean to to disparage them. A lot more people are taking photographs, are tweeting and texting those photos of poll tapes out. That's how we know, about the Jim Gilmore problems. That's how we talked about earlier, other problems that have happened over the past few days. But it's a matter of people getting involved, not turning away, not thinking that, well, I have voted, my job here is done, I'm going home.
Yeah, and I might add that it's also imperative that they know what their rights are, particular to their state, particular to their primary, what ID that they're supposed to have, not supposed to have, and we can discuss whether or not they should require it. But prepare yourself for that process so that when somebody says, hey, you can't vote here, or you're in the wrong precinct, or you don't have the right ID, that you have the information to challenge that. And if they don't have it readily available, Brad, where can they go find it?
Well, you can go to for the photo ID business.
Yeah.
That information. Yeah, actually, Google has made it pretty easy, as I recall. You can type in your state, let's say Texas, and photo ID, and they will tell you what the status of the current law is, because it changes all the time as the court fights continue. The other thing you've got to know, by the way, very quickly, is that when you are voting for a Republican, you are voting for restriction of voting. You are voting for less access to the polls. That's not a partisan statement. That's just a fact. Republicans want to keep people from voting.
Yep. Brad Friedman, the expert on this issue.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.